Aurora Brown and intersectional psychology acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of country throughout South Africa and their connections to land, water, and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Indigenous people listening today. Hello and welcome back to Intersectional Psychology. I'm your host, Aurora Brown. I'm a registered counsellor in Cape Town, South Africa. I'm so happy to be back with you all. How are you doing? Let me know by commenting in your podcast app or emailing me at intersectionalpsychologypod@gmail.com. Today we're returning to our series on transgender health in South Africa to rethink autism and gender diversity. I'm very excited to welcome a guest who has both professional expertise and lived experience of the intersections we've been trying to hide. Siv Greyson is an autistic, African, and transgender liberation scholar. They are a gender diversity and inclusion specialist trained in social anthropology, sociology, and gender studies. In 2022, they served as the first gender and sexual diversity advocate in UCT's Faculty of Health Sciences. And since 2023, they have been working as a co-researcher on a position paper on gender-affirming healthcare for gender dynamics. Currently, they are pursuing a master's degree in gender studies at Nelson Mandela University. So, Siv, welcome to the podcast.
Hi Aurora. Thank you for having me on here.
Would you say there was a specific turning point where you felt like you could claim and hold all of these identities more fully rather than, feeling pressured to choose one over another?
Realizing I was queer at 12 was quite scary, but by the time I got to university, I was so deep within myself that it just feels very okay when I start exploring a different identity marker. But with autism, it really changed everything. It changed how I understood myself in relation to other people. It changed how I was able to understand my experiences in school and in my early life. And I spent so much of my life feeling like there was something different about me that wasn't accounted for. And I thought, maybe it's because I'm an only child, or maybe it's because of where I grew up, or maybe my family unit's a bit different because, I was raised by my grandmother and my mother. And being raised by women does shape you in these really beautiful, idiosyncratic ways. But when I got the diagnosis, it took me 1.5 years to really understand what it meant to be autistic, because it took me time to stop masking, to stop trying to hide all the different challenges that I was facing in the world, but also trying to hide that I didn't know how to communicate with people, that I had to work really hard on that. And there's a few other things that I tried to hide, like my preferences around food or my sensitivities to light or sound. Leaning into my disabled identity, because for me, my autism really is disabling. I think it's made me a better activist in that I've had to peel away all of these harmful ideas about what it means to be human and what it means to be a quote unquote good human. And I've had to start really understanding that our worth as humans is innate, that we are all worthy and deserving just because, which then led me on a whole other route of learning about abolition and how people are treated in the prison industrial complex. And there's so many layers to this human life thing that were opened up because of my autism diagnosis. And then you have how being Black in white space can feel incredibly weird and bizarre. And it might sound strange speaking about, white space, especially in a quote-unquote post-apartheid South Africa. But my private schools that I went to here in the Eastern Cape, a lot of the places I found myself because of my financial access meant that for a lot of the time, I was one of very few or the only Black person in a room of white people, whether it's a restaurant or my school. So I've had so much experience of not fitting in a way that makes me belong or not belong to a group of people in society. But the autism diagnosis showed me the ways in which I've been struggling to fit in, and this is such an academic word, but on an ontological level, on the level of day-to-day living and breathing. It feels like, of course, I'm always trans, I'm always Black, I'm always, queer in a sexuality sense. But in my house, it doesn't matter in the same ways, Whereas even in my quietest, most solitudinal moments, my autism has an effect on how I experience life. And my views on myself and my brain, or my expectations on how I should live, have an effect on life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we are starting to see kind of the death knell of capitalism, hopefully, but I don't know how long that process is going to take. But I'm seeing people starting to talk about replacing GDP as a metric of a successful society with quality of life as a metric of success. And I think that is something that we should be working towards. You were talking about with abolition as well, everyone is deserving of dignity and respect and a good quality of life. And our world, this planet, it has enough resources for all of us. We just need to ensure that everybody has equitable access to it. Talking about access, can we talk a bit about healthcare? What's it been like accessing gender-affirming care in the South African public system?
Well, what a ride. It's what I will say. I'll begin by saying that for the majority of my life, I've had access to private healthcare, which means that whenever I've ever had a cold or I've struggled with a sore tummy, I've been able to book a doctor's appointment, get there at a specific time, get seen within an hour, and then go home and get my medication. So I've had the immense privilege of experiencing healthcare the way that many more people deserve to experience healthcare, which is that you get the care that you need at the moment that you need it without having to wait in line forever, wondering if you're going to get served in the ways that you need. However, with gender-affirming healthcare, I've done a lot of that on my own without the help of my mom, who pays for medical insurance. And that's been a different, I am not exactly in a very profitable discipline or workspace. I'm a gender diversity person. I work for NGOs. There's not much money in these spaces. And also a lot of my first big gender-affirming healthcare thing that I did was top surgery. And at the time, I was still a student. So the way I went about it with the top surgery was I crowdfunded. And this was, I believe, in 2021. And the landscape for crowdfunding was different then, in that as time has passed, it has become more and more difficult to rely on crowdfunding for anything, whether it's gender-affirming healthcare, crowdfunding to bury your grandmother or even other forms of healthcare. It's been very hard. But for me, and I think it's really about my social capital, it's about how popular the name Siv Greyson can be, and especially in queer space, that I was able to raise the funds for my top surgery, which was 70 something thousand rands in 10 days, which is like, yeah, it's like, it really doesn't feel real. It to this day, I've had top surgery and everything, and it still doesn't feel real. So that, it was something. I still feel incredibly lucky that I was able to convince people who knew me, people who didn't know me, to send me money. I still feel like I'm not grateful enough, because you can't, in that situation, you can't pay someone back. And people know that. I mean, we know that. I know that when I donate to a crowdfund of sorts. But yeah, there's no way to really put into words how much I needed that surgery, how thankful I am that people saw that need and wanted to help me. Yeah, I don't know. It can feel like we live in a very isolating world, in a world in which it's really hard for people to help each other, even if they want to. So I was able to then pay for my top surgery out of pocket, because going through the state system is just not realistic. I didn't have 25 years. And yeah, it can sound like we're over exaggerating as trans people when we talk about how it's either gender affirming healthcare or death, but it was really giving, I'm out of here if I don't get this, because it was just really hard to get through the day, to wake up in my body, to feed this body when I had so many terrible feelings of my body. So much in my life opened up to me because I got top surgery, because I didn't have to think about that part of my body anymore. And I could just celebrate being in my skin, allowed me to. I think it's really was a turning point even in my career, because I just had more space in my brain and in my heart and in my emotional state to be able to focus on other stuff. And then when it came to HRT and being on testosterone, again, I did on my own. And with that, I had options-ish, because I was in Cape Town. So I could have gone through the trans clinic, which quite a few of my friends have gone through. And I don't think initially Wits RHI was as popular, but they were definitely in existence. But I ended up hustling for some cash and finding ways, selling things sometimes, so that I could afford to go to Dr. Thompson, because I was like, you know what? I really want to have a doctor who's trans. Like, I just want to experience that. And I've been getting my hormones through Dr. Thompson since. But yeah, I do have to oftentimes go through a more loan-like situation where I'm able to get access to my medication, but I gotta pay my doctor back as soon as I can. Or moments where I've asked friends to help me here and there, and then I gotta pay them back. And yeah, it's been kind of cuck, because when I moved back home, my plan, which is Gqeberha in Eastern Cape rather than Cape Town, I was like, okay, it would be a good idea now to do the public healthcare thing and try and get some of my HRT in that way. But Wits RHI is closed because funding cuts from USAID. And I don't know, I don't really have a job right now. I'm pursuing a master's. I don't know what the future of Siv getting hormones looks like, especially watching so many of my friends and comrades in Gqeberha just not have anywhere to go. But yeah, like, even if you're just gay, like, just not even like gay in a way that scares people, like I'm talking just straight up homosexual, you go through so much in the public healthcare system when it comes to sexual health and sexual and reproductive. On top of that, doing research. So for gender dynamics, Ingrid Lynch, my co-researcher, and I were working on this position paper, I really got to see what was and wasn't available for trans people when it came to healthcare. And I got to see that it's not just that gender-affirming healthcare is scarce or solely available for people with money who can just pay, but healthcare in general is not very trans-affirming.
And it's not just that the doctors aren't kind of doing the work, but the education system is not teaching them either. I've spoken to many doctors who recently qualified, many psychologists who recently qualified. They said they never encountered a trans person during their internship. They had maybe one lecture on gender-affirming care one time.
I mean, as someone who was on the inside of a health sciences faculty, I can attest that there are a lot of barriers to changing the curriculum, and that the biggest barrier is that there is apparently just no space in the curriculum for education around specialized trans healthcare. And from where I'm standing, gender is brought up in the curriculum a lot. There's a lot of moments wherein they're speaking about men something something or women something something. And I really think that the changes that we need aren't just a course on trans healthcare that people can opt not to take, but that we actually need the gender binary to be dismantled in the whole curriculum, because I find that they have more than enough time to teach cisness, there's clearly more than enough time in that few years to come across that cis people exist. But it seems that transness has been really erased outside of that one lecture here and there.
Exactly. I love what you're saying, because it's not about carving out a whole term or semester or something for trans healthcare. It's about, when you talk about gynecology, talk about
all kinds of people.
Exactly. And, our country has such high rates of crime and violence, and we've spoken a lot about the more hidden violence or implicit violence that we experience as well. And I've heard some mental health practitioners say that, most South Africans are living with chronic PTSD, but you face additional layers of threat or marginalization. So what does safety look like for you, socially, emotionally, physically?
Socially, I feel safe in spaces where being weird is encouraged. So whether the idea of being weird is being neurodivergent or a wheelchair user, whether the idea of being weird is being queer in a sexuality or gender sense, or the idea of being weird is that you value human connection more than money, for example. I like weird places. I think that places that are more flexible and more open to different kinds of being. I feel very safe around anarchists who are also anti-racist and anti-patriarchy. I feel safe around people who are able to receive me saying no and don't make a big fuss about it. I tend to feel safe around people who recognize their ability to hurt other people and who are willing to do what is necessary in moments where they do accidentally or unmeaningly hurt someone to mend. And then I think honestly, my safest place is my home right now, which I feel really thankful for because I worked really hard to make the space safer. I spend a lot of time with my mom just trying to expose her to, human sexual and gender diversity. I tell her about the work that I do, whether it's the position paper or when I was working at UCT. And we've also done a lot of work together around understanding how each of us. I now better understand my mom and how she thinks and how she feels, and it's the same in terms of me. So I really do feel that our home that we share, that we also share with my cat, is really safe. So I love being at home, I love being in my room, I love being around my mom, and it's become, through a lot of hard work from both of us, a very safe and very, very careful and intentional and brave connection. Because I think, yeah, you do need to be a little bit brave when it comes to your ability to possibly misunderstand or hurt someone, but also brave enough to know that it could be okay, that you could come out of it okay. And also brave to, for on my mom's side, she has been, I'm just so proud of her, which is why I'm like talking so much about it. But she's been incredibly brave around just realizing that some of the ways she was taught to parent don't work for me, and being brave and listening to me talk about moments in my childhood where she didn't do the quote unquote right thing, whether it's in terms of gender or sexuality. Like, we've gone on quite a journey. So, and then physical safety, I have two handfuls of people that I call my people, that are like closest people. Mama is one of them, but quite a few of my friends are in there. And pretty much as long as I'm within a meter of one of those people, I feel safe, because no matter what space we're in, we're able to just, amongst each other, create enough safety that we can almost protect each other, the world outside of us, which is like such a beautiful aspect. I really hope people have that, because it's life-giving to have people.
You have a really special connection with your mom, and I love how open and reciprocal it is, and the work that you've both put into building that relationship. Some queer people unfortunately don't have that in their families of origin, but you've also spoken about chosen family and friends. So where have you found, those support systems outside of your family of origin, and where would you recommend people who don't have that at home go find people?
I mean, my chosen family came first, I will say. Mom and I have been on this journey for a long time, but it's only in the past few years that she's really become someone that I feel completely safe with. And chosen family is awesome. It's such a beautiful queer happening, as much as it comes from pain and loss and grief and rejection or abandonment. I think that it is incredible that we can choose people and choose to love them, and they can choose to love us. But yeah, in terms of how I met these folks, there's so many different. I mean, there's a few, maybe 2 or 3, that I met on Tinder. Yeah, sometimes you don't work out as a romantic or sexual connection, but like platonically, don't underestimate how awesome that can be. There's a few that I met in my lecture classes, in my gender studies class, or my sociology class. A few folks that I met through people. A lot of the times, if you meet a queer person, you'll meet more queer people because we find each other. I've also, I think, deepened friendships through queer events. I think more than anything, it's time. I've been really lucky that a lot of the friends I feel very safe with, I've known for years. And that feeling of, oh my word, I am actually genuinely safe with this person, takes time. You start off as friends who don't know each other's boundaries that well, who maybe will say a joke that goes too far, and then you learn, oh, okay, that's a boundary. It's a journey, I guess. It doesn't happen automatically. I don't think one can just go to a pride march and find their chosen family, but I think that friends, connections, colleagues can grow. Those relationships can grow from something that's quite casual to something that's deep and lifelong. I think the biggest thing is to just be open to deepening a connection with someone through exploring the things that you wouldn't explore with someone that you don't know well. Trust is built. There's so many different ways to build trust. I mean, one of my closest friends, we live together. Yo, that will teach you so much about life, and that can really make or break a friendship. But we just got so much closer, and I see that person as a sibling. If someone out there is looking for or thinking about intentionally, it goes a long way to tell someone, I'm looking for chosen family and you're really cool and I like hanging out with you. Can we explore this? I think sometimes people reserve that kind of intention just for romance or sex, when you can be just as intentional with platonicity. You can go on friend dates and go on many friend dates and learn each other in that way. I think there's a lot to love and connection.
100%. Yeah. I love what you said. It's not always easy. Sometimes, you do say the wrong thing. Relationships are uncomfortable in the beginning, and that doesn't mean that they are not good relationships. They just mean that they're unfamiliar. And you have to take the risk. Obviously, don't put yourself in dangerous situations, but you have to take the emotional risk of trusting someone and seeing if that trust is something that is going to last, something that can be built on.
Yeah, so, and it's that bravery, right? You gotta be brave. Yeah, but careful. Brave but careful.
So how can allies, whether those are cis people or neurotypical people or people with racial privilege, how can we show up better?
So I've noticed that allies or people who try to be allies struggle a lot with fear and insecurity. Whether it's the fear of being wrong or hurting someone or saying the wrong thing, or there's a lot of fear. And the insecurity is around not being good enough, not being the most woke person in the room. And to that, I said, I need people who want to be allies to be a little braver, just a tiny tad braver, and to do it scared. Just do it scared. To say the thing scared, to stand up for the person scared, and to just be ready to handle the consequences of saying the wrong thing. It's going to be okay. It can sometimes feel impossible to do the right thing. And I think that people need to worry less about doing the right thing and more about asking what needs to be done and doing what they can. I think that if you take right and wrong out of the equation and just focus on what needs to be done, which a community will tell you. As somebody who cares about Congo's telling us, stop getting new electronics. Sharp, I'll do that. So don't project your ideas of what should be done. Rather, whatever community you want to stand with, ask them what they need. And then you look at yourself and look at what you're capable of doing and offer what you can do. And it can be hard because you have to be very honest. You don't want to offer more than what you can show up for. And you don't want to, hoard resources that could be shared. It's a delicate dance. But I find for myself, because I'm not oppressed in all kinds of ways. I'm just, oppressed in a few specific ways. And when I try to stand with a group of people, for me, it's just about doing what is within my capacity and doing according to what that community says needs to be done. And then also just being brave. It's okay if I get things wrong. I will learn. And people are quite forgiving. And to take it one step at a time.
I love what you said about doing it scared, because yes, doing it scared means that you will sometimes make a mistake, but you then also, I think maybe something that takes the most courage is not just doing it scared, but is then going and apologizing and owning your mistakes as well. It's such a hard lesson to learn, and it takes such humility to apologize and to own your mistakes. And I think maybe even the hierarchies that we were talking about earlier, that plays into it as well, because now you're having to kind of be humble or take that humility in front of a group that you kind of maybe saw as inferior. And that is really, it's just that, like, it can fuck with your whole worldview and your whole...
Yeah, it can. It's very emotionally dysregulating. And I think that there's a lot of power in just taking a step back, crying it out, moving through your emotions, and then coming to the person and say, yo, like, I fucked up,
And also remembering that they don't owe you forgiveness.
Yeah.
Like you said,
Yeah.
You said earlier, most people are forgiving, but they don't owe you forgiveness. And, you know, it's not their responsibility to forgive you if you've done something.
Yeah, because that's not why you're apologizing.
Exactly.
At least for me, when I apologize, it's not to undo what has happened, and it's not for forgiveness either, or to feel better. When I apologize, it's so that that person knows that I'm acknowledging my actions or words had an effect on them, and that I'm cognizant of that as we move together in the future, whether it's with a stranger and I'm like, I know I hurt you, stranger. I am going to use this knowledge I have of my ability to hurt people in this way to try and not hurt other people in the same way. People want to be good and want to be right. And I think just let go of that and more just try to continuously be the kind of person who can learn and do a little better next time.
Thank you. So thank you so much for being here. Where can listeners go to support you and your work?
You can find me on Instagram, the easiest, just at Siv Greyson. And my Instagram has links for all the other stuff, like my writing, my photography, some of my teaching. And yeah, feel free to pop me a DM. My DMs are open, but I do reserve the right to ignore a DM. So don't feel too much like you will definitely get a response from me. I am trying to leave Meta though, so don't get too invested in the Instagram.
Same.
I am building a website slowly. It just takes time.
Thank you, Siv. I really appreciate your time.
Pleasure. Thank you. This is a good chat.
And thanks to you, the listener, as well. Look after yourself. And remember, everyone has the right to live with optimal mental health. Thank you for listening to Intersectional Psychology. Please follow or subscribe to the podcast to get every episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review Intersectional Psychology in your preferred app. It really helps other people find the podcast. This episode of Intersectional Psychology was researched, written, recorded, and edited by me, Aurora Brown. For a transcript of this episode, please see the link in the show notes on your podcast app or go to intersectionalpsychology.com. You can also check the website or the show notes for a full list of references for this episode. A video of this episode with closed captions is available on youtube.com/@intersectionalpsychology. To support this podcast and get access to bonus content, including additional episodes and interviews, as well as more guided mindfulness sessions, please go to patreon.com/intersectionalpsychology. You can also chat with me on Blue Sky at intersectpsy.bsky.social and Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok at Intersectional Psychology. But mostly Blue Sky. Aurora Brown and Intersectional Psychology are committed to the Cite Black Women praxis. All episodes of Intersectional Psychology are for educational purposes only and are not intended to be a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. I, Aurora Brown, am not able to answer specific questions about individual situations. Always seek the advice of your health provider with any questions you may have regarding a mental health condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard or seen on this podcast. If you think you need immediate assistance, please call your local emergency number or any mental health crisis hotline. Everyone deserves good mental health.